Today, we're going to be talking about or learning about arrays. And I hope that through this video, I can help you to learn more about this very powerful tool called arrays in a very simple way. So let's start out by talking just kind of generally. What are arrays? Well, arrays are a type of variable. We've already talked about variables in a previous video, and we used the analogy of the post office to show you about variables. Use that same type of thought when you think about arrays. But there are a couple of differences between a standard type of a variable and an array. And here are a couple of them. First of all, rather than there being a lot of different sizes and shapes like you see in a typical post office, an array contains a group of variables that are all the same size and all the same type. In fact, in some ways, it's easier to think of them a little bit more like a couple of columns and a bunch of rows. Here on the right, you can see an example of this with this figure, my array, and it has a column with the index and a column with a value. And so in this case, it will hold up to 9 different slots between 0 and 8. And that index then tells the computer, it allows you to tell the computer which row you want to add a value to or change a value within. So as you create an array, just like a variable, you get to give it a name and you get to give it a type. And then you can set the value, again, of all of those as a part of the size or the type. You get to tell the computer how many you want to store. Whether it's 5, 10, or 1,000,000, you can tell it that. And then you can set them each individually. So each value has an index, like I show in this diagram, that can be used to reference it. All right, so I hope that this gives you a little bit of an idea. Now let's use the array in practice, okay? So we're going to be using it, we're going to be writing a program about the magic 8-ball to illustrate how to use an array. Now, if you've ever used the magic 8-ball, it's a round ball, and you shake it and you ask a question, and then the ball will choose the answer for you. Now, this isn't really psychic, the ball. What it's really doing behind the scenes is it's generating a random number, and then it's matching it with some corresponding answer that it has already in the ball. I don't want to dash your hopes of the magic 8-ball, but that's basically what's happening. And we're going to use an array to store these different answers within the magic 8-ball, okay? So with that in mind, let's flip over to our program. Okay, so we've got a program here. I've already kind of started it out for you. By this time, we've done several of these, and hopefully by now you know how to get it started to this point in time. So what I want to do now is let's talk about what we want to see within the magic 8-ball. So the first thing we want to do is we want to have the person ask a question. Now, in reality, we're not even going to do anything with the question because it doesn't matter. The next thing we're going to do is, of course, we're going to capture the answer to the question. Okay. Now, I'd mentioned earlier that the magic 8-ball generates a random number, so we want to do the same thing. And I'll show you how to do that. And then we need to pick the answer using the random number. So the random number is basically going to become the index to the array, as we described a little bit earlier in this video. And then the last thing is we're going to display the answer. All right, so to set this up, we're going to be using 2 objects that we're going to bring into the program. The first one is one that you're familiar with already, and it's the scanner. Cat type. Okay. The next one is actually in the same library, and it's called random, and it's going to give us our random number. Okay. So before we get into doing those, let's create our array. All right. So an array is a pretty easy thing to create. We're going to tell it what the type of the array is, just like any other variable. And in this case, we're going to be storing a bunch of answers, so they're really strings. And we'll call them my answers. And then we're going to put these 2 open and close square brackets. They're these things. Okay? Now, we could just be done with it at this point, but we're going to actually use, there's a way to declare the array, and at the same time, if we already know what all the values are going to be, we're going to just set those values at the same time. And rather than typing all of them, I'm just going to copy and paste them in here. So in this case, looks like I didn't close one of these. In this case, we have 10 answers that correspond with that will be used as a part of our magic 8-ball. Okay, and they have a comma that separates each of them, and they have these squiggly braces at the beginning and the end. Okay, so there's our answer. All right, so let's go through the rest of our program then. The first thing we want to do is we want to ask a question. So let's get to system out print. I'm not using print line here. It did it on its own. Sometimes it's too smart for its own good. Please ask a question. Okay. Again, it's too smart for its own good. And now we're going to use the scanner in the same way that we did before. Scanner input equals new scanner, and we put this system in here. Finish it off with a semicolon. Now we're going to create a variable for us to put the question in. That's the next thing. Capture the question, the answer to the question. All right, so we'll call it my question equals, and we're going to use this input object, and then just next like that, and that'll give us the answer to the question in the my question variable. Okay. The next thing, if we look here, is we need to generate a random number. So in the same way that we just did here with scanner, we're going to instantiate random. We'll call it rand equals new random, and we'll just have it open like this. That works for us. Now what is going to happen with this random number is we're going to go say, give me a random integer, basically a random number, and bring it back in the same way that we did with a string, except it's going to do it on its own. You don't have to type anything. So we're going to declare a variable here called, let's call it index equals rand dot next int. Now we have here, up here we have 10 answers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And when they end up in the array, it's going to be 0 for the first index, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? So when we create this, this is also 0, starts with 0. So we're going to put a 9 in here, and what that means is give me a random number between 0 and 9. And that'll correspond with our array. Okay? All right. So we're actually pretty close to being done here, because the rest of it's all going to happen on a single line. We're going to say system out print line. The answer to your question is, and then we're going to go to the array. The array is called my array, right? And we're going to use those square brackets, and we're going to put the index, this random index, right in there. Did we call it my array? My answers, sorry. Okay, and that is going to go to the array, take the random number that between 0 and 9 and plunk it in there and display the resulting answer. All right, so let's try this. We're going to come down here to the console. We're going to run this baby. All right. And right down here you can see, please ask a question. I'm going to say, am I going to win $1 million? The answer to your question is ask again later. Okay? So if we look here, up in the array, ask again later is the first slot in the array, so it would be a 0. All right? So it gave us 0. So let's just, for the heck of it, run it again and see if we get a different number. Okay. Am I smart? The answer to your question is cannot predict now. So the random number that was chosen was 1, in this case, the second one in here, and it used that one to pick it. So this is a really simple example of using an array in a fun way using this with this magic 8-ball and a random number to show you how to use an array. Arrays can be incredibly powerful and a huge tool for you as a programmer. I hope this enables you to kind of start using them on your own. Thank you.